Beyond the gilded walls of the Sun Dynasty lies a secret that history failed to bury. In the year 1207 of the Great Cycle, a king vanishes without a trace, leaving behind only a cipher etched in a sacred scroll and a kingdom teetering on the edge of chaos. Forget the glorious chronicles. This is the true account of betrayal, divine machinery, and the relentless quest for the ghost of a ruler. The air in the imperial palace of Indrakala was thick, not with incense or the usual summer humidity, but with a silent, suffocating dread. It was the 23rd day of the month of Ashada, in the year 1207 of the Suryavanshi cycle, and the throne of the Sun Dynasty was empty. King Devavarman III, known to his people as the Architect of Tranquility, had vanished. The official proclamation, drafted and sealed under the frantic hand of the royal council, spoke of an unforeseen withdrawal into spiritual contemplation, but everyone from the lowest stable boy to the most revered Maharaja knew it was a lie woven from fear. King Devavarman was a ruler of meticulous habit and empirical thought, not prone to sudden, unannounced ascensions into the Himalayas. The man who understood the meticulous habits of the king best was Arjun, the royal scribe of the fifth chamber. Arjun was a figure perpetually fading into the gilded woodwork, mid-40s, lean, with the stoop of a man who spent his life hunched over copper plates and rare vellum, his hands perpetually stained with indigo ink. His power was invisible. He was the keeper of all schedules, all treaties, and most crucially, all of the king's private notes, the true, unvarnished history of the realm. He stood now in the Chitrashala, the hall of painted histories, the chamber where the king was last seen. The hall was a staggering testament to the dynasty's 500-year reign, its walls covered in vast murals depicting the glorious conquests and legendary feats of the Suryavanshi kings. Yet, the grandeur only amplified the emptiness. A single silver-inlaid desk sat precisely at the chamber's center. Upon it lay the only evidence, the king's ceremonial dagger, its hilt cool to the touch, and a thin rolled-up cylinder of treated Burjapatra, birch bark parchment, tied with a simple, untaxing cotton string. Arjun ignored the dagger. The dagger implied struggle, theft, or murder, a narrative the military guard, led by the blustering General Rudra, was desperate to confirm. Arjun's empirical mind was drawn to the parchment. He gently picked it up. It was not sealed with the royal crest, nor addressed to the Queen Regent or the council. It was a private message, wrapped with the knot known only to the king and his scribe, the Vayu Granthi, the wind knot easily undone but difficult to duplicate. General Rudra, a man built like a granite statue who viewed thought as a dangerous illness, barreled into the hall, his armor clanking. "Scribe, have you yet determined which of the palace servants took him? We have 50 men currently under the whip in the lower dungeons." Arjun did not flinch. He slowly unrolled the parchment. "General, the king was not taken. His dagger lies here, unsheathed. If there was a struggle, there would be blood, shattered lamps, perhaps a scuffed tile. Observe the floor, it is immaculate. Every lamp is intact. This is the Indrakala Palace, General. An invader would have to bypass 3 layers of royal guard, the Varaha traps in the outer courtyard, and a network of tunnels known only to the royal engineers. The king chose to leave this place." Rudra snorted. "Nonsense. Kings do not choose to abandon their thrones, scribe. They are forced to. What does that miserable scrap of bark say?" Arjun held the parchment up to the afternoon light, filtering through the high jali, perforated stone screen. The message was not in the formal Brahmi script used for state letters, but in a peculiar, almost cryptographic form of ancient Sharada script Devavarman had obsessed over, believing it held geometric keys to architectural excellence. Arjun began to translate, his voice low and precise, a striking contrast to the general's gruff urgency. "My scribe, the structure is complete. The foundation stone of the 5th dynasty was not granite, but Kalay, time. They demand their due. The path is not in the sunlit annals you record, but in the nether scroll, the one they said was fiction. Do not seek the man who wore the crown. Seek the mechanism that moves the crown. The door is where the celestial archer aims his arrow at the heart of the serpent. Ganga is the key. The cycle ends. Devavarman. Silence hung in the Chitrashala. Rudra blinked, genuinely confused. What madness is this? Celestial archer? Nether scroll? The king has clearly lost his wits. This is a disgrace. Scribe, you will translate this into a confession of political flight, and we will begin the search for him in the eastern provinces. No, Arjun said, his eyes still fixed on the unique characters of the Charada. This is not madness, General. This is a cipher, and it is entirely consistent with the king's deepest, most dangerous fascination. King Devavarman was not merely an architect of tranquility. He was an archi-mathematician obsessed with the founding myths of our kingdom, particularly the story of the first king, Vidyadhya, who was said to have built the palace not with labor, but with time and motion. Arjun looked up, his mild eyes now burning with the light of a man who has suddenly been handed the one truth he always suspected. The Nether Scroll is not fiction. It is a text believed to be held in the deepest vault beneath the Kapaleshwara temple, a blueprint for the mechanisms the first king used. Mechanisms we believe to be allegorical, but which King Devavarman spent his last decade trying to prove were real. The following morning, the royal council, paralyzed by the conflicting reports of his spiritual withdrawal and a forced abduction, decided to form a secret investigative cell. General Rudra was officially tasked with the military search, the political cover, while Arjun was given the true mandate: decipher the cipher and locate the king's final point of egress. Arjun's investigation began not in the shadowy bazaars or the dusty roads, but right where the vanishing occurred, the Chitrashala. He requested the full architectural blueprints of the palace complex. The Indrakala Palace, built 5 centuries prior, was a colossal, sprawling structure. But Arjun knew Devavarman's secret passion: astronomical architecture. General Rudra assumed the king left the palace grounds. Arjun murmured to himself, spreading the ancient, brittle parchment of the blueprints on a wide teak table in his own cramped, ink-scented chamber. But the king's words were, "The door is where the celestial archer aims his arrow at the heart of the serpent." This is not geography. This is astrology mapped onto architecture. Arjun's specialized knowledge, usually relegated to verifying dates on treaties, became his greatest asset. He knew that the Suryavanshi kings founded their capitals on astronomical alignments: celestial archer, the constellation Danu, Sagittarius, the heart of the serpent, the star Alpha Scorpii, known locally as Jaitha. Arjun pulled out his astronomical charts, cross-referencing the night of the king's disappearance, Ashada 23rd. He calculated the exact alignment of these 2 points in the night sky, and then overlaid the angular projection onto the palace blueprint. The line of alignment, when traced across the massive complex, bisected 3 key structures: the royal treasury, the queen's chambers, and crucially, the back wall of the royal observatorium, a structure rarely used and officially sealed off 50 years ago after an earthquake damaged its spire. He focused on the observatorium. The king, in his private notes, had often complained that the observatorium's design was flawed, citing a specific architectural text that claimed the building was a perfect sphere placed in a rectangle, a device, not a building. Arjun secured the key from the retired royal engineer. He entered the observatorium, a cylindrical chamber choked with dust and cobwebs. The ceiling was a vast hemispherical dome, now cracked. In the center of the floor stood an enormous, intricate Samrat Yantra, supreme instrument, a massive triangular sundial. He moved to the back wall, where his projected alignment line intersected the stone. There was no door, only smooth, fitted laterite blocks. Remembering the king's cipher, Ganga is the key. Arjun began to search the chamber for anything related to the sacred river. He noticed that the Samrat Yantra, in addition to its complex markings for time and declination, featured an engraved image at its base, the goddess Ganga riding her Makara crocodile vehicle. He knelt, inspecting the engraving. The Makara's mouth was a shallow recess. Arjun recalled a small heavy copper pendant the king always wore, which was missing from his private chambers, a representation of a Ganga water token, a ceremonial coin used for the annual river ritual. Without hesitation, Arjun pulled a small, rough bronze copy of the token from his pocket. He kept one for administrative verification, and fit it into the Makara's mouth. A low grinding sound, the noise of massive, dry stone shifting against massive, dry stone, echoed in the silent chamber. It was not the sound of a simple hinge, but of calibrated, heavy machinery moving, the laterite wall exactly at the point of the celestial archer's aim, slid inward by a foot, revealing a gaping, dark, dust-filled passage that angled sharply downward. It was not a storage room, nor a natural cavity. It was a passage of deliberate, architectural concealment. Arjun drew a deep, ragged breath, pulling a small, oil-soaked lamp from his belt. The smell of dust and ancient, dry air rushed out. He had found the mechanism. He had found the king's path. The air in the subterranean tunnel was not stale. It was dry, cold, and strangely ionized, carrying a faint metallic odor, like ozone after a lightning strike. The passage was narrow, but expertly cut and lined with polished black basalt. A stone not quarried within 100 yojanas, miles of Indrakula. Arjun proceeded slowly, his lamp illuminating strange, repeating symbols etched into the basalt, not the known scripts of the Suravanshi cycle, but geometric patterns, interlocking circles, spirals, and crystalline structures that resonated with the king's obsession with the first king. Vidyaditya. The structure is complete, Arjun muttered, recalling the cipher. The foundation stone was Kala, time. He realized the true purpose of the tunnel. It was not a simple escape route. It was an entry point into the palace's hidden operational layer. The Suryavanshi had always boasted of their architectural perfection, claiming the palace was built in the image of the cosmos. Arjun now suspected the boast was literal, not poetic. After nearly half an hour of walking, the passage widened into a circular cavern. Arjun stopped, his lamp held high, his jaw slack. This was not a cave. This was a chamber of astounding, ancient engineering. The cavern's ceiling was supported by massive polished stone pillars that converged at the apex. But the floor was the true marvel. It was a single seamless disk of highly reflective green-tinged jade, perfectly level. In the center of this jade disk stood a colossal segmented, bronze object, a complex arrangement of gears, weighted levers, and spiraling arms, standing nearly 20 feet tall. It was a machine, a clockwork engine of unprecedented scale and precision. Arjun, the man of documented fact, felt the cold weight of the astonishing, unbelievable reality. This was the mechanism the king spoke of. This was the legendary engine of Vidyaditya, which the official histories claimed was simply a metaphor for good governance. The machine pulsed faintly. It was powered by a slow, continuous drip of water from a hidden source in the ceiling, falling into a complex series of copper bowls and counterweights. It was a giant perpetual Yala Yantra, water clock, but instead of merely telling time, it was generating power and motion. Arjun cautiously approached the machine. The sheer weight of information it represented, a technology that shouldn't exist for another 1,000 years, was overwhelming. The machine was integrated with the structural pillars of the cavern, suggesting it wasn't just in the palace. It was integral to its very foundation. He noticed a small circular recess on the jade floor near the machine's base. It was lined with copper, and within it lay a piece of fabric, a square of royal crimson silk, carefully folded. Arjun recognized it. It was the king's own pocket Utteria shawl. He picked it up. The scent of the king's personal sandalwood musk was faint but unmistakable. Beneath the silk, the recess contained a third message not written, but etched into the copper lining itself. The message was in the same cryptographic charada. The scribe sees. You know the Kala is not a substance, but a path. The cycle demands a price. The key to the engine is the frequency of the water flow. The nether scroll is the maintenance manual. This machine is the palace's heart. It does not protect the king, it moves him. If you follow, you must understand the first law of Vidyaditya. The throne is a vessel, not a seat. I leave you the regulator. Use it or seal the cycle forever, Devavarman. The message was accompanied by a complex miniature diagram, a 5-pointed star inscribed within a heptagon. A design Arjun recognized as a rare mathematical seal of the first king. Beside the etching, tucked into a barely visible niche in the jade, was a small, exquisitely crafted object, a palm-sized sphere of black iron, lined with dozens of tiny, precisely cut notches. This was the regulator of variable aperture, designed to control the flow of the water driving the colossal Yala Yantra. Arjun understood the breathtaking implication. The king hadn't been killed, nor had he run away. He had used this colossal hidden engine to somehow move himself. The vessel and mechanism implied that the throne room itself, perhaps the Chitrashala, was a movable chamber, a sort of ancient lift or transporter. Powered by the sheer kinetic energy of this clockwork engine, the king had vanished not from the palace, but through it. He had become part of the ancient, hidden infrastructure. Arjun now faced the agonizing choice. General Rudra and the council demanded a corpse or a political confession. His duty was to the continuity of the realm. But the king had entrusted him with the regulator, the key to this incredible, astonishing secret. Arjun gripped the iron regulator, its metallic coldness a tangible counterpoint to the dizzying warmth of the revelation. The colossal clockwork engine pulsed faintly in the subterranean chamber, a heartbeat of ancient technology thrumming beneath the very foundations of the Suravanshi dynasty. The king had vanished into the infrastructure of his own empire, manipulated by a force greater than court politics, the mechanism of Vidyaditya. He knew he could not present the regulator or the engine to General Rudra. The general, driven by ambition and a fear of the unknown, would either destroy the machine out of superstitious terror or attempt to weaponize it for immediate political gain, thereby silencing the truth forever. Arjun's loyalty was not to the empty throne, but to the system of knowledge the king had risked everything to uncover. He carefully replaced the crimson silk Utteria and pocketed the regulator. Before leaving the chamber, he initiated the Vidyaditya protocol, a secret maintenance routine. The king had taught him a specific sequence of tapping on 3 adjacent basalt blocks that momentarily interrupted the main water flow without stopping the clockwork. The subtle change in frequency, inaudible to an ordinary ear, was enough to stabilize the mechanism and prevent the king's path from being immediately retraced by anyone lacking the complex calculations. He then retracted the Ganga water token, and the laterite wall of the observatorium silently closed, sealing the truth in darkness. The second part of the king's cipher was his destination, the nether scroll fiction to the historians, a maintenance manual to the archi-mathematician. The scroll was said to be hidden beneath the Kapaleshwara temple, dedicated to Lord Shiva, which stood 3 kosas about 7 miles from Indrakala. This was no ordinary temple. Kapaleshwara was the oldest known structure in the region, predating the Suravanshi by many centuries. It was built of cyclopean stone blocks, massive and interlocking without mortar, a style attributed to the mythical Naga architects. It housed a silent, secretive order of priests, the Kapela ascetics, who paid no tax to the crown and claimed allegiance only to the rhythm of the first cycle. Arjun arrived at Kapaleshwara at the cusp of dawn. The massive, tiered structure rose like a petrified mountain, its shadow falling across the waking landscape. The temple gates were guarded not by soldiers, but by two old, granite-faced priests wielding staffs of polished salwood. The royal scribe, Arjun, one priest stated, his voice dry as sand. Recognizing the scribe immediately despite his lack of official regalia. The rhythm of your duties seems broken. You seek the secrets of Kalpa, Eon, not the mundane concerns of Jana people. I seek knowledge entrusted to me by King Devarman III, Arjun replied, maintaining the composure of his office. He spoke of the nether scroll. The priests exchanged a look of profound ancient weariness. The scroll is not a story, scribe. It is a burden. If the king sought it, he knew the risk of activating the prana mandala life cycle. Follow. They led Arjun not into the main, incense-choked sanctuary, but around the massive eastern perimeter wall, toward a set of steps descending into the earth. The descent was long and spiraling, lined with cold, damp stones etched with intricate yantras, mystical diagrams. Arjun could feel the air pressure increasing. This was not a basement. This was a purposeful, architecturally sealed descent into the geological strata. The passage terminated in a vast, vaulted, underground chamber, dimly lit by perpetually burning oil lamps that emitted no smoke, a marvel in itself. This was the archive of the Forgotten Cycle, a repository of texts far older than the Sun Dynasty. The chamber was lined floor to ceiling with clay tablets, thick palm leaf bundles, and scrolls encased in crystallized resin. The Kapila ascetics were the unacknowledged librarians of time. In the center of the chamber, 3 senior ascetics, their bodies frail, their eyes sharp and ancient, sat around a low obsidian table. The oldest, Acharya Vishwarupa, motioned for Arjun to approach. The nether scroll, Vishwarupa began, his voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of centuries, is not one text, but a collection of 16 copper plates, inscribed by the Naga architects and later curated by Vidyadhya. The first king. It is the operating manual for the Indrakala Prana Yantra, the machine you found beneath the observatorium. Arjun pulled out the regulator. The king called the machine the mechanism that moves the crown. I found this regulator, left in the chamber. Vishwarupa nodded, eyes fixed on the notched iron sphere. That regulator controls the Kala Chakra Dvara, time wheel door. The king did not vanish. He initiated a relocation event into a secured, hidden chamber within the palace's structure, a place only accessible when the prana yantra is operated at a specific laya, rhythm. Why? Arjun demanded. Why the elaborate vanish? Why not simply walk there? Because, scribe, the throne of Indrakala is a sacrifice engine, the Acharya said, his words dropping like stone weights. Vidyadhya did not build a fortress. He built a stabilization matrix. The ancient world was highly unstable, plagued by catastrophic seismic and elemental disturbances. The prana yantra draws kinetic energy from the Dharani chakra, Earth's magnetic field, and converts it into a stable, localized energy field, a constant tranquility over Indrakala. This is the truth behind your king's title, Architect of Tranquility. He inherited a lie. Arjun suddenly understood the astonishing truth that undercut the entire Suravanshi history. The stability of the Indrakala kingdom was not due to the Sun Dynasty's wisdom, but to an ancient, self-sustaining mechanical intervention. Vishwarupa pushed the centerpiece of the obsidian table toward Arjun. It was not a scroll, but a stack of 16 thin, highly polished copper plates, held together by ancient braided silk cord. The nether scroll. The king discovered this fatal truth during his study of the original palace blueprints, the Acharya continued. The machine requires a ritualistic, cyclical recalibration to maintain the stability field. This recalibration is lethal. It requires a massive, complex kinetic energy surge that only a human body can initiate a king upon the throne. Every 5 cycles, a sovereign must perform the Raja Homa, royal sacrifice. If they fail to do so, the prana yantra destabilizes and the kingdom will suffer a catastrophic systemic collapse. But the Suryavanshi cycle is over 500 years old. Arjun exclaimed, the horror sinking in. The previous 3 kings did not perform the sacrifice, Vishwarupa revealed. They found a temporary, non-lethal substitute, a process that drained their life force over years, leading to the early deaths chronicled as fever or weakness. But Devavarman was an archi-mathematician. He calculated the cumulative instability. He realized the temporary fixes were failing. The next king would face not a slow drain, but instant annihilation. So he vanished, Arjun concluded, his mind reeling. He refused the sacrifice, but he also refused to condemn his son, the Prince Regent. He chose to hide until a solution could be found. Arjun spent the next 3 days and nights immersed in the nether scroll in the archive, fueled only by the ascetic's thin, rice-based broth. The copper plates were indeed a technical manual, detailing the astonishing engineering of the Naga architects. The script was complex, blending Sharada with a geometric Siddham script, requiring Arjun's highest linguistic and mathematical abilities. He learned that the Indrakala palace was, in essence, a giant living citadel. The prana yantra beneath the observatorium was only the heart, the rest of the palace, with its sprawling courtyards, temples, and residential wings, was a complex network of resonating cavities, hydraulic levers, and counterweights, all tuned to a specific frequency generated by the heart. Key concept, the king's final cipher. Kala is not a substance, but a path, now made perfect sense. The palace did not merely sit in time. It was manipulating local time, creating a zone of amplified stability. Arjun discovered the true horror of the king's situation. Devavarman had not simply relocated. He had used the relocation event to escape the Kala Chakradvara at its moment of lethal activation. He was not hidden in the palace, but potentially suspended out of phase with the rest of the structure, trapped in a secure chamber designed to withstand the self-correction shockwave. The final 2 copper plates of the scroll provided the critical piece of information, the coordinates of the king's relocation chamber and the method for reversing the process. The relocation chamber was situated precisely underneath the royal treasury, a location protected by the palace's strongest. Varaha traps, an ingenious double bluff by the king. The method for reversal required the regulator and an exact 7-step frequency adjustment sequence to be performed on the prana yantra. However, the scroll contained a terrifying caveat, etched into the 17th line of the final plate. If the regulator is applied more than 7 days after the initiation of the relocation event, the internal resonance of the sealed chamber will invert. The king will not return. He will be converted into the final necessary pulse of Kala time, providing the full kinetic charge required to stabilize the realm for 1,000 cycles. Arjun checked the date against his pocket Panchang almanac. Ashada 23rd was the vanishing. Today was Ashada 29th. 6 days had passed. He had 1 day left. He thanked the Kapila ascetics, promising them that the true history of Vididaya and the Naga architects would be preserved. He left the archive not as a humble scribe, but as the unwilling guardian of the realm's most terrifying secret. He raced back toward Indrakala, the regulator heavy in his hand, the nether scroll bound tightly to his chest. He had the map and the manual. Now he had to face the labyrinthine palace again, not to search for a hidden king, but to operate the clockwork heart of the ancient god before it consumed the man he swore to serve, and by doing so, seal the true destiny of the Suryavanshi dynasty. Arjun's return to the Indrakala palace was a frantic, silent blur. He re-entered the observatorium chamber under the cover of the midnight watch change, his body stiff with exhaustion, but his mind burning with the calculated steps ahead. The Nether Scroll 16 copper plates was carefully secured in a leather satchel, and the iron regulator was gripped tightly in his hand, the air inside the mechanism chamber, when the laterite door slid open, felt heavier than before. 6 days had passed since King Devavarman III initiated the relocation event, and the prana yantra, the clockwork heart, was throbbing with a desperate, accelerating rhythm. The water drip supplying the engine was falling with visible speed, and the colossal bronze gears were grinding faster, emitting a high-pitched metallic whine that spoke of imminent, catastrophic stress. Arjun knew the mechanism was attempting to compensate for the king's absence, drawing more and more magnetic energy from the Dharani chakra. If he failed, the machine would complete its own brutal, automated self-correction by converting the king into the final energy pulse needed to stabilize the realm for the next 1,000 years. He knelt by the colossal Yala Yantra. He had one objective: to perform the 7-step frequency adjustment sequence detailed in the scroll to reverse the relocation event. And he had only hours before the 7-day deadline. The sequence was highly technical, demanding perfect placement of the regulator in various recesses of the machine's complex framework, each position corresponding to a subtle shift in the water flow and thus the machine's frequency. Arjun placed the regulator into the first copper notch on the engine's base. Click! The machine's whine dropped an octave. The first adjustment dot as he reached for the second notch. A harsh, metallic voice shattered the quiet. "Stop, scribe! Drop the mechanism!" General Rudra stood at the mouth of the tunnel, his heavy armor glinting in the faint lamplight, flanked by 6 elite royal guards. He had traced Arjun's disappearance and, using the military's own hidden maps, located the sealed observatorium. The sight of the massive, impossible clockwork engine confirmed the general's deepest fears of madness and black magic. "General, you do not understand what this is," Arjun pleaded, keeping his hand on the regulator. "This is not magic. It is engineering. The king is trapped. We have hours to save him and, incidentally, save Indrakala from tectonic collapse." Rudra strode into the chamber, his sword drawn. "Lies, mad ravings! This monstrous device is why the king abandoned us. He was practicing sorcery. You have conspired against the stability of the crown. That iron sphere is a weapon of the Daitya's demons. I shall smash this mechanism and restore order." Rudra lunged toward the nearest gear. Arjun reacted instinctively. Knowing he could not physically defeat the general, he pulled the regulator out, rushed to the opposite side of the engine, and slammed it into the 3rd notch of the sequence. Crack! The sudden, uncontrolled shift in the machine's frequency sent a powerful surge of localized kinetic energy through the jade floor. Rudra, caught mid-stride, was thrown backward 20 feet, his armor clanking loudly against the basalt pillar. The force, localized and non-lethal, bought Arjun precious seconds. "You have destabilized the heart," Arjun shouted over the rising shriek of the prana yantra. "If you damage this, the resulting feedback loop will destroy the palace." The general, shaking but enraged, rose, signaling his guards. Arjun focused intensely, ignoring the incoming threat. He had to complete the sequence.